Hello, it's Adedoyin Jaiyesimi here, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I want to have a friendly gist. It's a conversation that we're going to have, and we're going to talk about comms titles of communications, job roles, and what you should know about them. And the reason why I thought it would be nice to have this conversation is because I find people when they come to me, either one-on-one session or they want me to help them with something. And maybe, for example, somebody is the communications manager, and as they begin to speak, as they begin to tell me things, I can see that this title is bigger than their skill level. I think there have been numerous occasions where I have people that they've entered into a role where they're essentially leading a team, but the knowledge gaps are so gaping. And in my head, I'm like, why did you do this to yourself? Because not only can this potentially limit you in this role, it will also limit you in the next role that you want to get, because you have this title and people assume that you have these skills, but you do not have these skills. And then it's just a lot. And then you have the other side of it where someone is doing so much and the person has a title that is not reflective of the work that they're doing, that it is below what it is that they should actually have as titles. And so I said, you know what, let's have a conversation about this. The reality of it is that there really isn't so much of a standard in terms of titles in communications and PR. Maybe PR is a bit better when you work in organizations that you start as an officer, become an account executive, account manager, client executive, all of those things. Maybe they have a bit more structured title, but in terms of like corporate side of things for communications, titles are not that straightforward. So I'm going to be sharing my thoughts, and I would like to hear your thoughts. That's why this is a conversation. This is Adedoyin sharing her thoughts, and I really like to hear your thoughts and your comments as well, what you think about this topic. So the first thing for me is that it's important to understand what the common titles in comms are. So starting out, you're either starting out as a comms intern, you're an intern, you either just finished school or you're still in school. Usually the next thing to that is a comms officer. So that's an officer role, is usually entry level. You're at the very beginning, you're just learning, you're just gaining your own experience. Fantastic. Now, the next step, you might operate as a comms officer for 3 to 4 years so that you get all the skills and all of that. The next step is usually communications manager. Now, communications manager is more mid-level. If you are the entry level and you have a communications manager role, I'll say you should think twice about that role. But anyway, that's my opinion. Communications manager is more mid-level, because by the word manager, you must know how to manage people. You must be able to do things by yourself without supervision. That is what manager requires. In certain organizations and certain settings, communications manager is even more high level. So you can have someone 10 years of experience, communications manager. So from mid-level to senior level, that's what that communications manager captures. Then you now have other varieties, like, so there are some organizations where they will have junior communications officer, senior communications officer. So senior communications officer obviously usually sometimes is even higher than communications manager, but they should be able to do the same thing. If you're a senior communications officer or you're a communications manager, you should be able to, especially communications manager at the higher level in terms of experience, should be able to function at the same level as a senior communications officer. Then you have head of communications. That means that you are heading the entire team. Depending on the structure of your organization, you're either heading communications for one organization or a group of organizations, and then you can then have group head of communications. You can have communications director, or you can have chief communications officer. Those ones are high levels. I'm not going to touch on those ones because, you know, my focus is on the young and emerging professionals. So I'm going to focus on the lower end of the titles. So you're looking at comms intern, you're looking at comms officer, you're looking at comms manager. Another one is comms specialist. That I believe is like the most confusing title, because in some organization, comms specialist is very niche and, you know, on a higher or in the higher spectrum of things. While in some organization, comms specialist is like, oh, you do social media, so you're a comms specialist, which again is just the confusion is a lot. And then you have communications consultant or advisor. I've seen organizations that hire for this role, they say they want a communications advisor that has 3 years of experience. Excuse me, What's this person going to advise you on exactly? But I'm not here to throw shade. I'm here to have what? A conversation. So broadly, I mean, there are many more titles, but broadly, those are the more common titles that you will find. If there are other titles that I've missed out, please feel free to put it in the comment section, especially if you have a title that hasn't been highlighted. But those are the common ones. Now, for me, what you should be focused on at the very core of it is what exactly is embedded in this role. So sometimes I will look at a JD, let's say on LinkedIn, this organization is hiring for a communications manager. Once I see minimum of 3 years experience, or would they say, oh, they're looking for someone with 3 years experience with this, I know that they are not serious. I know that they want someone that they are going to kill and give all the work, rather than get a senior person and have a team around that person. So I look at the JD. What exactly is this asking for? That's really the starting point, right? So if you are taking a communications manager role, communications officer role, and you are seeing things that it is beyond your level of knowledge, and you know there are two things. There's the, oh, you stretch into a role, because I don't know that there's a role that you will be 100%, you tick all the boxes 100%, because ideally you're meant to grow in a role, but there are just unrealistic expectations that you do not want to shoot yourself in the foot. How can you be 2 years, 3 years in the industry? You're just finding your way, and then you're trying to get into a role, and they say to you that you are going to head the team. What exactly are you heading? You need a head. Do you understand what I mean? Don't let people put you in this or set you up to fail, because I've witnessed people that have taken such jobs, and it's not funny, right? There is a time and season for everything. There's a time where you learn, where you are supervised, and there's a time where you begin to then become a supervisor and manage others. Please go through your process. Don't let anybody entice you with a big title. And more often than not, the pay is not commensurate. That's the one that is always annoying me. The pay is not commensurate to the work. So they set you up with this title, set you up with the task, and then the pay is not worth it. So sit down and really look at the job description. Is this role befitting of the title that they have given for this task that will be covered? And this is very important. Please don't take on a role or a title that you are not prepared for. And we know innately what we can or cannot do, or what we have the skill and competency for. There are two things, and I pray that you will have the wisdom to separate it. I've shared on this platform where I went to take a head of digital role that I had no business taking. I didn't know anything about digital. Me was content, social media. Instead of me to focus there, I just thought, digital, we are all in the same space. But it was called digital marketing. What a big and epic fail. So you don't want to set yourself up for failure in that way. You don't want to, especially because communications is a role that currently is under resourced. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you do not have the internal support that you need. Now, because you have this title, externally people think, you're a big girl now, and then there's not that shame. I remember someone saying that because I have this title, they expect that I should know. And there are times that people will come to me and ask me a question, like, how did you get a communications manager or senior comms manager and you do not know this? And I realized, oh wow, the person doesn't even have the skill. There's a huge knowledge gap. And I realized that's why they're asking me this question. That's why they do not know these things. And sometimes it's not even about the number of years. So if you spent the last 5, 6, 7 years just coasting, doing tactical things, you've not built your knowledge, you don't have the required skill to operate on that high level. You need to be able to pinpoint it and close those knowledge gaps and work on yourself so that you don't limit or stunt your growth. I hope you're with me. If you have any contrary thoughts, please put it in the comment section. Like I said, I really want this to be a conversation because it's something that I have just been thinking about over and over again. Now that we flagged the different titles, why you should really think about what titles or what roles you go for, what exactly are you supposed to do with this information that Adedoyin is sharing with you? For me, one is, I like to give people feedback. I'm not of the opinion that somebody should come and tell me something and I take it hook, line, and sinker. And so in the recruitment process, you need to be able to give them feedback. You need to be able to say, hey, this role requires 3 people. This role actually is a communications officer role and not a communications manager role. You really need to set the expectations from the get-go. If I were you, I would advocate for a title that is befitting of that role. Some people say titles do not matter. I understand when they say that titles do not matter, but the reality of it is that in terms of career progression, in terms of where you're able to go in your career, titles actually do matter. So the flip side is that for those of you, and I remember having a conversation years ago with someone, and they were telling me that I think they had a comms officer, or they had a title on the lower end of things, and the person, their years of experience, the things that they were doing, I said, I need you to please go back to your organization and request for a higher title, because this work that you're doing, this title does not reflect it. And to God be the glory, she was able to get it, and that impacted on the next role that she was able to get. So let me paint it for you like this. If, for example, you take a communications manager role, you're 2 or 3 years into it, and then you want to be a communications manager at a more structured organization, for example, during the interview phase, it's going to be clear that you have knowledge gaps. It's going to be clear that you are not equipped and prepared for the role. And unfortunately, in the other role that you were in, you may not even have the chance to close those knowledge gaps, because it's almost be like you are what's that thing that they say, one-eyed man in the kingdom of the blind. And so it doesn't really help you. And then same thing as well, if you take a title that is less than what you're doing, in your next role, it's going to affect you, because they say, oh, comms officer, why are you trying to apply for senior this thing role? It's so far apart. But you have the skills and you have the competencies, because on paper, there's the level of screening that they do before you actually get into the interview. So while I do agree on some level that title shouldn't matter, but to get into certain spaces, it does matter. And you also want to be able to defend every title. I think that's the final point that I'm going to say, so that this video is not too long. Make sure that you can defend this title. What I really like to do, I stalk people on LinkedIn. So if I was going to go back to 9 to 5, I have my eyes on communications director, chief communication officer roles. What are the skills, for example? So I look at LinkedIn, I look at job descriptions, what is required? Do I have these skills? Do I have practical, tangible experience? At my level, it's not just head knowledge that's needed, it's practical experience. And so I begin to benchmark myself. So maybe you need to do a skill audit. If you find yourself in a situation right now, you're like, Adedoyin, I'm here, I'm in this WhatsApp group, I have a title that is way above my head. Perhaps you have a conversation with HR, perhaps you just be aggressive about upskilling so that you can close those knowledge gaps and make sure that you can rise into that role. But there are some things that just take time. Let's just be honest about it. There's some things that just take time. Either ways, I just thought to share my opinion and thoughts on this comms job title role. If I'm just going to summarize very briefly, is make sure that any job that you're taking, that the title truly reflects what you are bringing to the table. It reflects the work, and it does not put you in a box or set you up to fail in any way. And as you are taking a new job or a new title, please think about your next job, because your role or you getting into an organization is not for that organization. You always want to picture your career in context of where you want to go 5 or 10 years down the line. This role, is it going to get you closer there, or is it going to take you farther away from your goal? But I really love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on comms job titles and how to navigate getting some of these titles that are common or not so common? Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. Bye.